So it's crazy to say that it is already so close because it feels like they only just revealed the game, but the open beta for Battlefield 6 is launching within essentially 12 hours from this video going live. And for those who didn't know, you can already access the beta and actually change all of your settings prior to those servers actually being live. And so today, to get you guys ready for those servers to go live, I'm going to run you through all of the settings you want to be changing based on my own playtime last week in LA. And so without wasting any time, let's get stuck right into it. Now I'm going to go through each of these different categories. What I will say is there's a lot of stuff that isn't really worth changing. So I'm not going to touch on every single setting in the game. I'll just sort of touch on the stuff that I think is worth changing. But if you do have any questions about stuff I didn't touch on, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to get to all of those in the comments. Now, starting off with the accessibility settings here, there's not too much that I've really changed in these settings. I did change the tinnitus sound effects volume just down to 75. That's just personal preference. It doesn't really make too much of a difference. Heading down to the graphics settings though, what I will say is that with the color profiles, I'm actually usually one to not touch these because I just generally like the way the game looks by default. But the friendly color here, I noticed in my playtime last week that I was often seeing teammates and accidentally shooting them because this color doesn't really show up all that well in game. And so obviously feel free to leave it alone, but I would recommend actually just changing this to a slightly darker blue color, just because that feels as though that will stand out a little bit more for some reason. If you guys watch the stream as well, you will notice it a lot. I was shooting so many of my teammates because it didn't really look like they had an icon above their head and it was getting a little bit frustrating. So it's worth changing that, but if you want to keep it the same, that is obviously fine as well. Moving into the camera effects, I generally just turn the motion blur down. Now, I might be a bit of a weirdo here, but I actually don't mind a little bit of motion blur. I know most people hate it. I usually like to leave it around 10. I don't really like motion blur, but I also don't like when there's none at all. So I just leave that at 10. But the weapon motion blur, I turn completely off. I also turn the camera shake down as much as you can. I wish you could turn that to 0, honestly, but the lowest you can put it is 20. And then I also turn this setting off as well, because this will stop your crosshair from essentially decoupling from the center of the screen. It's a really weird and annoying setting that a lot of modern shooters have. To me personally, the crosshair should always be the center of your screen, and for some reason that isn't the case in a lot of modern shooters, so doing this will keep it in the center, which at least for me, I just personally prefer that. Now moving on, there are some hold and toggle control settings here. I have changed the infantry sprint to hold instead of toggle. The reason for that is because I'm actually going to be playing keyboard and mouse and I just want a little bit more control. Now if you're a controller player, I would keep this on toggle personally, so it is kind of just personal preference, but it's worth toying around with this one anyway. I've got the crouch toggle sprint set to crouch so that you can actually crouch sprint a little bit easier. I've turned the crouch slide off here because I'll go through that in a second, but I've actually got that key binded to something specific. I've also turned off the double tap crouch for sprint sliding just to give me a little bit more control. I don't want to accidentally double tap a button and slide when I didn't actually mean to, so that's why I've turned that off. Now for a controller setting here, I've got the interact and reload setting set to reload to tap and interact to hold. This just means that if you are in a situation where you can reload or like open a door at the same time, for example, without this setting, sometimes it can do the wrong thing that you're not trying to do. Maybe you're trying to open the door, but it will just reload your gun and it's kind of annoying. This way, it means that if you want to reload, you just tap the button, or if you want to interact with that door or whatever you're doing, you can just hold that button instead. I've also set the skip revive and request revive buttons here to toggle. This just means that if you want to skip the revive screen, for example, rather than holding that button down until you've fully died, you can just tap it and it will automatically do that for you, which for me, I just find that to be a little bit easier, and it also probably saves your controllers and your keyboards from constantly holding those buttons down. Now moving on to controller vibration, this one is obviously personal preference. For me, I actually turn my controller vibration off. This is something that, to me anyway, it just is another distraction for my brain. I'm already getting the feedback from the game on my screen that I'm being shot. I don't need vibration to let me know because that's just another thing my brain has to try and comprehend. So for me, I generally play with vibration off, even though I used to hate that, but once I got used to it, I don't think I can ever go back, honestly. Lastly, for the tutorial and hints and stuff, I've just turned all of these off. If you're a Battlefield veteran, you don't need any of these on. If you're new to the game, keep them on, but even after you've been playing for a few hours, you can probably come back and turn all of these off. Now moving on to gameplay, this one right here, the capture area outline. I found this to be really nice actually. It puts like a line of paint essentially on the ground when you're in a capture zone so you can actually see where the capture zones are when you're playing Conquest and stuff. If you want more immersion, I would probably turn this off, but I actually found this to be really nice when I was playing last week. For those wondering too why this one has the white dot, meaning I've changed this stuff, this is just those toggle settings that I went through earlier. They're just sort of put in here again. So if you've already changed those in the accessibility settings, you won't need to change them again. As for your sensitivity, this stuff is all personal preference. You can feel free to use mine if you're completely lost on where to start. This top one is the controller sensitivity, whereas this one is mouse sensitivity. If you're completely lost, feel free to start out with these and just see if you like it, but sensitivity realistically is just completely personal preference. There is no such thing as the right or wrong sensitivity, so it's worth just playing around with those. These ones here as well, I've already sort of touched on earlier in some of the early settings, same with the interact and reload as well. Once again, for the vehicles, this is all just sensitivity stuff. So again, just muck around with this. Feel free to use mine as the base, but again, it's going to be different for most of you guys. And then I don't touch any of the aim assist stuff just because the aim assist in this game actually feels pretty balanced. It's not too strong, it's not too weak, so I've just left all of that how it was. Now moving on to the controller settings, you'll see here that I've changed the button preset to alternate. What this does is it will change your crouch button from B to the right stick, and it will change melee to the B button instead, or obviously circle on a PlayStation controller. Now my justification for this, and I've said this in so many guides over the years as well, not just for Battlefield, just literally any shooter that has this option, always set this, because what this does is it puts all of your movement outside of essentially jumping into both of your sticks. You've got the left stick to move around and sprint, you've got the right stick to look around and now crouch as well, and it means that essentially all of your movement is in the sticks. Movement is absolutely key to any shooter. Doesn't matter how good your aim is, if your movement isn't good, you're going to get killed. And so for me, it just makes way more sense to have all of the movement in those sticks. It means I don't have to like take my thumb off the stick to crouch if I'm in the heat of a battle, for example. I can just quickly tap it and it will instantly put me behind cover. And this is one of those settings that I genuinely change for every shooter that I ever play. And trust me guys, once you change this, and once you get used to it, because I won't lie, it might feel very weird when you first start doing it, but I genuinely believe once you change this and stick with it for about a week or so, I just about promise you guys will never ever change this back, because it is just, to me, a far superior setting to the default settings. Now, if this video has helped you guys out so far and you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is so much more content on the way. I'm absolutely sending it with Battlefield 6, and there is a lot more content on the way. So if you are new, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of the upcoming Battlefield 6 content. Now, moving on to mouse and keyboard. If you are a controller player, you can obviously just skip through these settings, but once again, you've got the sensitivity here, which you will have already changed, and some of the control settings as well. Now for the infantry keybinds, one thing that I've done here is I've actually removed the middle mouse button from the alternate keybind here. If we come down, I've also put the slide keybind as C, and I've kept it here as well for crouch toggle. My reasoning behind this, I haven't actually tested this, so just keep that in mind, but in order to slide, you have to be sprinting, and so if you want to keep the crouch toggle to C, you can do that, and then it should work that if you're sprinting and then you press C, then it will slide instead of crouching. Again, I haven't tested this. This may make it a little bit dodgy, and if that is the case, you can just clear the crouch toggle, because I personally think it is better to have the slide set to C, because sliding in this game is going to be a lot more useful, and you can still obviously crouch with left control anyway. Moving on down, these ones are just personal preference, but I've put some of the buttons on my mouse to the alternate settings here for gadget 1 and 2. Mouse 3 for me is the little button on the side where my thumb is. Obviously not every mouse is going to have that, but most high-end mice will have that. And then I put gadget to the middle mouse button, which is why I removed that from up here. You've already got Q to use your ping and stuff like that, so you don't really need the middle mouse, and it means you can quickly pull out your second gadget if you need to. And then I've also set the fourth mouse button, which is the second one next to my thumb, to the class gadget as well. That is essentially it for all of my keybinds, though obviously again this is all personal preference. There's no such thing as the best keybinds, because it all comes down to how you guys feel with the keyboard and mouse. Everyone's going to have their own separate play styles. Now moving on to your graphics, once again these are a little bit dependent on your system. It does have the performance preset little area over here, so it's good to be able to tell if this is going to like max out and you're going to start dropping frames or anything. For me personally, my PC is solid enough to handle balanced and ultra. Now when it comes to visibility, sometimes actually going into the graphics and changing some of these to low or even to like medium and stuff, they can actually help with your visibility of enemies. And so if you're finding it hard to see enemies, which I haven't found in my playtime, but you might find in your playtime, if you're having that trouble, just come and change some of these settings to low, and that can help with your visibility. Now for field of view, I've got mine set to 118. I had it on 120 in the playtime that I had in LA, but I was a lot closer to the screen and it felt like I needed as much field of view as I can. I've got it set to 118 and I might even lower this depending on how it feels. But again, field of view is completely personal preference really. It's one of those things where objectively speaking, you do see more on your screen with a higher field of view, but some people also don't like how it looks. And also, even though it's good to have more information on your screen, sometimes that can sort of result in information overload and you might start to get a little bit flustered. And so again, personal preference, but for me, my take on field of view is the higher the better, because you essentially just see more on your screen, and to me that is far better than just not seeing stuff on the edges of my screen. I also do the same with the vehicle field of view. Keep in mind, I'm not much of a vehicle player at all. These settings I've already gone through earlier. And then obviously all of these settings I essentially just leave alone, except for the icon intensity. I did turn this up a little bit just because, like I said, I was not seeing teammates sometimes, or I should say teammate icons. So I have just put that up from, I think it was on 60, I put that to 80 instead. Moving on to the audio settings. Once again, these are a little bit more personal preference than anything. I generally turn the music volume down a little bit. I keep the master volume up. I like to keep the sound effects volume up because this is the in-game stuff that you'll hear. So gunshots, jets, stuff like that. You want as much of that coming through your headset as possible because that is obviously key information, whereas the music isn't quite as important, but it's also good to keep that music in the background because sometimes it can add quite a bit to the immersion. I've also turned these down just a little bit just to prioritize getting all of the in-game information that I can through the sound effects audio. All of these settings though, I've just pretty much left most of them alone. I have then also turned the radio music down just a little bit because I don't think you really need to hear it, but also I don't mind having it on. So I've turned that to 60 across all of these, but again, that is pretty much just personal preference. Lastly, moving on to the system. If you are a creator, it is worth potentially turning these on, especially if you're a bigger creator, which if you are, I'm not sure why you'd be watching this video, but for any of you who are bigger on Twitch or YouTube or whatever, sometimes it can be worth turning these on so you don't get stream sniped. And really that is about it for all of the settings. Obviously the extras just has like the legal stuff. So that is essentially it for all of the settings that you guys should be changing in the open beta for Battlefield 6. Like I said, you can do this right now. You don't even need to have the early access either. Every single person right now can download the beta and you can access your settings. It's just that the servers aren't live yet. So I would highly recommend coming in and changing all of this before the servers go live. It means that when the servers do go live, you can literally just jump in and start playing. And like I said, if you guys have any questions about any of these settings, or even if you disagree and want to let your opinion be heard, be sure to leave a comment down below. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.